The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
On April 8, 2022, I rose to ask the government when they would invest in a, quote, for Indigenous, by Indigenous, urban, rural, and northern housing strategy, which they promised since 2017, but have failed to deliver. After the NDP pushed for action, the Liberals proposed just $300 million to initiate strategy over 5 years. This is hardly a drop in the bucket, and it is not good enough. We need a federal government response that meets the gravity of this national crisis. The situation in my community is so dire that it literally keeps me up at night. People are dying and lives are at stake. And on July 25th, fire officials issued an order to immediately disperse an encampment of the unhoused that disproportionately are represented by Indigenous people seeking shelter and community together in tents along East Hastings Street, citing serious fire safety concerns. Yet when these tents come down, there is nowhere for people to go. Meanwhile, residents are being increasingly targeted by threats of violence and criminalized by authorities. There are simply not enough safe and affordable homes for people to move into. There are currently more than 2,000 identified homeless individuals in the city, and this number is likely an undercounting. About 40% are Indigenous, meaning that Indigenous peoples are nearly 18 times more likely to be homeless in Vancouver compared to the rest of the population. Unhoused people also face serious health concerns and challenges. Many have chronic substance use issues and physical or mental illness. Health needs cannot be met while surviving on the streets. At least 225 unhoused people have died in Vancouver over the last 5 years. This is the reality today in Canada, and the government needs to face this truth. In August 2020, I joined the BC provincial government and the Mayor of Vancouver, calling on the government to urgently enter into a 50-50 cost-share agreement with the province to build more supportive housing and acquire new housing stock. Yet the government did not even respond to this call. And on August 3, 2022, I wrote to the minister again with an urgent call for action. Again, there was no response. On August 23rd, I jointly wrote a letter with the Union of BC Indian Chiefs to the minister. A month later, there wasn't even an acknowledgement that the minister received the letter. Instead of responding to the crisis, the minister is choosing to just ignore the plight of the unhoused. It is as though they don't exist, that their lives do not matter. The NDP has been raising the alarm on the housing crisis for decades, but this government continues the pattern of previous Liberal and Conservative inaction. In fact, it was the Liberals' plan under Paul Martin who cancelled the National Housing Strategy in 1993. And since that time, both the Liberals and Conservatives have allowed displacements caused by real estate developers, rental evictions, demo evictions, and the financialization of housing by landlords, REITs, and private entity firms, equity firms, looking to maximize profits by driving up rent. The housing and homelessness crisis is not inevitable. It's a failure of policy, resources, and political will. Through immediate intervention, through action, and through a human rights-based approach, it can be solved. And so I'm asking once again, will the government commit today to adopting a human rights approach and adequately invest in a for Indigenous, by Indigenous, urban, rural, and northern housing strategy?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. In so many ways, the member is wrong. We have seen a government under the leadership of the current Prime Minister, virtually from the very beginning, back in 2015, that has taken a very progressive and aggressive attitude in both legislation and in the form of budgetary measures to support housing. In essence, bringing forward a national housing strategy. Billions of dollars, Madam Speaker, overall. And it is having an impact. I would challenge the member to indicate what government in the last 50, 60 years has invested more in housing in Canada, Madam Speaker. And I will give some thought to the member or the answer. She won't find a government, Madam Speaker, that has invested more than this current government has done over the last 6 years years, we have made significant investments. Let me highlight a few when it comes to the important issue of Indigenous people. In the collaboration with ISC and the CMHC, as of December 31st, 2021, First Nations have been able to support the construction and renovation and retrofitting of 25,102 homes on reserve, of which 17,432 have been actually completed, Madam Speaker. To support housing in Inuit and Métis communities, $980 million has been announced by our government since 2016. These investments have been provided to partners, and thousands of Inuit and Métis families are now living in new and renovated homes via strategies led by Indigenous partners, Madam Speaker. In the 2022 budget, we announced an additional $4 billion in funding for Indigenous housing over 7 years to accelerate work in closing Indigenous housing gaps, including a $2.4 billion over 5 years to support First Nation housing on reserves, $845 million over 7 years for housing in Inuit communities, $190 million over 7 years for housing in Métis communities, and $565 million over 5 years for housing in self-governing and modern treaty First Nation communities. Lastly, Madam Speaker, through the Indigenous Homes Innovation Initiative, we are supporting creative projects led by Indigenous people to design and build more effective, sustainable, and culturally inspired living spaces, some of which will specifically support Indigenous women and girls of other vulnerable populations. Madam Speaker, this government has committed and followed through on a wide spectrum of dealings in terms of Canada's housing crisis. I could easily spend the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes just talking about some of those initiatives. The bottom line is, Madam Speaker, we have for the very first time in a generation plus, you'd have to go back many years if in fact you could find a year, if you could find a government that has invested more in housing. And if you do the comparison of the NDP platform back in 2015, we have outdone that platform by a country mile, Madam Speaker. This is a government that understands the value of housing to Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and it continues to work with Indigenous leadership to ensure that there's, wherever the federal government can play a role, that we are in fact playing a role. We understand the importance of reconciliation and the way in which housing plays a critical role in it.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I don't know what rock this member has been living under. The truth of the matter is this. It was the Liberals who canceled the National Affordable Housing Program back in 1993. The NDP called for the government to build 500,000 units of true affordable housing to meet that need, a gap that the Liberals created when they canceled the National Affordable Housing Program. The member can talk all he wants. All he has to do is open his eyes. I invite him and the minister and the prime minister to come to Vancouver East and see for themselves, the people who are unhoused in our community today, who are dying today, who are being criminalized today. And for him to say those words to their face, that somehow their lives don't matter and that they're doing all there is that needs to be done to address the housing crisis. Shame on the member. He has not paid any attention to the truth and to face the truth.